Welcome, dear listener, to the Mantic Universe Podcast. This is Mark Zielinski. I've got Clem with me today. How's it going, Clem?
Great. Hello, everybody.
And we have a very special guest, Alessio Cavatore. How you doing, Alessio?
I'm all right. Hello. Thank you for having me. Hello, everybody.
It's been a long time in the making. I'm glad we finally got a chance to get together. So how is everything over in England today?
It's all right. I mean, it's windy, blackout, the storm is coming, but other than that, all good.
Perfect weather. That's great. So, well, again, like I said, thanks for joining us today. So we just wanted to go over some stuff, catch up with you, Alessio. The father of Kings of War. That's the whole reason we have a podcast and a community. And so I don't say it often enough, but thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
I concur. But the legend, the man, the legend, among other things, Kings of War. But
absolutely. So, hey, I thought we'd start off a little bit, Alessio. It's just for people who aren't familiar with you, and I can't imagine who isn't, but we've got to assume. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about River Horse, and just kind of give us a little background before we slide in?
Absolutely, yeah, of course. Asking me to talk about myself is always, is a great subject. So, I played lots of Warhammer when I was at university in Italy, 1995, 94, something like that, and won an Italian tournament, and that got me noticed when they were starting Games Workshop Italy. So I moved to England in 96, I believe, to work there. I worked there for 15 years. And while I was there, I worked on every system, every game possible. The peak of the career was, I guess, when my name was on all main 3 game systems in the rulebook. And then in 2010, I moved on and founded River Horse, which is my own company. The plan was to make games and sell games, but basically what happened is that a few people that also were ex-Games Workshop and had their own companies, like a certain Ronnie Renton, you might have heard of him. Basically, him and John started Warlord Games, but basically a few other people went, before you start your own games, do you mind writing a game for us? So actually, River Horse, like it's often the case, ended up doing something slightly different from what was initially planned to do. So I ended up doing a lot of services for other companies as well as our own games. So we ended up doing both. And obviously, like you said, for Mantic, the first job was Kings of War. Indeed, the first job that I've done for Mantic.
Well, that is a great story, Alessio. I know you've told it many, many times, but for our listeners, can you tell us how Kings of War actually was created? It's a great story. So
yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I think it was we were at Salute that year. I had just left, and Ronnie had left not long before. And we were having a drink or 2 or 3 at the bar in the hotel, and Warren Johnston of obviously at the time was a Beast of War. He kind of said to Ronnie, "You know what you should do? You should get this man to write a game for you." And it just so happened that Ronnie and I were literally talking about that. So Ronnie so Warren was prophetic, and started the whole thing. And the funny bits I think you're referring to is that proposed me the idea of writing a fantasy battles system. I said to Ronnie that I would have written it in 8 pages. I needed 8 pages for the entire thing. And he was like, "Yeah, sure you do. Yeah, of course." And I was like, no, I'm not kidding. And so basically the challenge was set, and they were like, I'll write you a full war game in 8 pages. And so I'll write it for them, play test it, write the army lists, which I don't think the armies were included in the 8 pages, but it was 8 pages of rules plus the army lists. And the outcome was bizarre, because when I presented it and people played it at Mantic, Ronnie got back to me saying, "Yeah, when you said 8 pages, we thought you were going to give us a little kind of funny small thing that could have been maybe a icebreaker, but then we would have had to design a proper war game, with hundreds of pages of rules and big tome, etc. But actually, this thing you've done, it works. It's a game. It's playable with Armies. It's just an interesting war game. And I was like, yeah, that's what I told you I was doing. He wouldn't believe me, and then he played it and went, oh, okay, no, it works. So yeah, that's how it came to be.
Oh, there you go.
Did win the bet after all.
Yes. I remember another funny story. Somebody at the convention, when I was saying, oh yeah, I wrote the system that fits in 8 pages, and he was like, oh, that's nothing. This system fits in 2 pages. I was like, really? Wow, show it to me. And he shows me a reference sheet. Because I go, yeah, no, you don't understand. You understand? It wasn't. I'm not saying that the reference sheet was 8 pages. I'm saying the whole game was 8 pages. The reference sheet, that was funny.
It's a A0, like poster size, 8 pages with a tiny, tiny font, but it's 8 pages. No, it's actually 8 normal pages. That's amazing. I mean, we've had a discussion in the latest episode about complexity versus depth, and I think that's the perfect example, right? Like, you don't need a lot of pages to have something that has a lot of depth, and so yeah, well done.
Thank you. Well, I mean, that's what I always say. The playability, in my case, playability versus complexity is always, some people tend to think that the more rules you have, the more complex, more interesting a game you get. I have grown to think that actually it's possibly the other way around, in a sense that let's bring it to an extreme. Chess fits on 2 pages, 1 page of rules. It's not a game without depth, however. So obviously that's an extreme. That's an extreme, but you see what I mean. That's like Yoda would say, "Don't judge me from the size of my rulebook."
Nice, but so I have a question about this. Was it something you already had somewhere in the back of your head long before this discussion with Ronnie, or because you said you played Fantasy Battle a lot and also obviously wrote a bunch of it once you joined Games Workshop. So was some of that frustrating and you wanted to do things differently but couldn't for various reasons? Or is it something that came to you kind of later, once you were free to do whatever you wanted to do? Or
well, I mean, I always, when I was working at Games Workshop, I certainly always tried to simplify things and streamline things and rationalize things. Was kind of my mantra, really, to the point that actually that got me in trouble, and probably in the end was part of the reasons why we didn't see eye to eye with some of the the bosses and stuff. So basically, my trying to simplify things was not always the right thing to do, according to higher ups, which being that it is a different company, of course, they're right. It's not what the company wants. So yeah, the desire of simplifying has always been there. I never actually thought about a game that was 8 pages long, but after leaving Games Workshop and playing other games, and I played things like Black Powder, Hail Caesar, things that Rick and Jervis have written, and to be honest, there are some mechanics in there that, for example, the fact that you don't remove models from a unit as it takes casualties. I thought that was brilliant. I thought, wow, this is great. It's so practical. You don't have to have all these pieces everywhere, and you just have blocks of things. You can make dioramas. So I thought that was fantastic, and that's one of the things I thought, I wonder whether I can do a fantasy battle system that has that element. So it was a combination of that, and indeed wanted to streamline things. Yes.
But so yeah, your core ideas for going into Kings of War were to simplify things, and is there anything else you wanted to bring into this different game or this new game, or like what were the the directing ideas behind the first edition, like making it an actual rule that was distributed, rule set that was distributed?
Yeah, I mean, the holy grail and the mission, if you want, is always to try to get a rule set where the rules disappear. That would be my task, my ambition, aspiration. Is the like in chess, when you play a game, you're not thinking about the rules. You're thinking about the moves. You're thinking about what to do. You're not thinking, oh, how does a bishop work again? What are the rules? How does it work? The rules are not a thing your brain considers. Your brain is busy thinking about the game and how to outwit the opponent rather than try to understand how the game works. So you want to get there, and I would say impossible, or I think it's impossible now on a war game because there's so many variables. It's so different. There's no grid of squares of hexagons. So it's a bit more. I think a war game is something in between a role play game and a board game or a chess game, where basically there's elements of precision, but there's also elements of fun and imprecision. Like moving stuff with a tape measure is not as precise as moving stuff on a square or on a grid. So basically, yeah, I think simplifying as much as possible was the aspiration. Other elements, one other thing that I thought was great with Kings of War was the intent of making it work like with basically so that you could use a chess clock. So the time element, the fact that you have a certain time where you act, and then there's a time where the opponent acts, and they are separate, so that you can actually allocate a time to each player, and they are responsible for their time. I think again that's a strong driving principle or design principle that I stuck to with Kings of War, which I thought was very useful for events, for tournaments, for fairness. So yeah, that was the big thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize that the clock aspect was there from day one or day zero even, because it is to me a critical element of the game as well.
Oh, yes.
Like when it's not your turn, you can kind of relax and rest, and when it's your turn to play, you have all information that you need from your list, from your opponent's list. Like it's pretty easy to parse everything that is in there and understand what's going on, and then as you mentioned, you can focus on the edition. Mark, do you want to?
Sorry, if I can interrupt.
Of course.
I can tell you're not a chess player, because when it is your turn, so when it is the opponent's turn, that's when you do the thinking. So the chess player always tries to do no thinking in your own time. You do the thinking in their time, and then as soon as your time comes over, you make the move and switch off again your time, because you obviously want to minimize the amount of time you spend on your time. So their movement time, their action time, is your thinking time. So
that's a good point. Actually works in Kings of War as well. Now that you say it, when you go to a tournament with a slightly tighter clock, it is true that you do think about what's going to happen, what you're going to do, and how you're going to approach things in your opponent's turn. And if you're really good, you think about what you're going to do in 3 turns. But I'm obviously not there.
Yeah, the ideal is you think in their turn, using their time to think, and then you execute the move as fast as possible in your turn. And then again, you think in their turn. That's what you're trying to do, because it's not always easy.
There you go. And that's good advice for you, Clem. You're playing goblins, so, you got to get down, move them, and roll those bones so you can get going.
Some of those charges you just don't take, like a rear charge with a horde of goblins. Just don't do it.
Well, unless you got a lot of time on the clock, and there might be a time for you to do it, but
as a goblin player, cool. Never. Never. Players are the even worse, I think. But with a horde army, you never have too much time. Can you tell us maybe a bit more, Alessio, about how the first edition of Kings of War, like the release and your experience around that time and your involvement, and how it was to work on this project with Mantic?
It was relatively straightforward, as in I wrote the rules, then the army lists, and the army lists were, I had this many, basically Mantic had a range of models, and it was relatively easy because I had already the models. It's like, these are the models, they need the rules. And again, I tried to keep it very, very compact and simple, and not to go overboard with special rules and exceptions, because I was sure from experience that would have come later. Because as a game develops, always the tendency is always to add more stuff, and the complexity increases and rules interactions increase. That's always the case. So I thought, no, we don't need all of that to start with. Simple profiles, 1 or 2 maybe special rules, but very small things. And so it was literally a very straightforward process. I mean, the the Armies part, because because I had the luxury of already having all the ranges decided. It was literally attach rules to this range of models and then write the rules. Those writing the rules and play testing, it was the most time consuming part. It's always the most demanding part. But no, it was fun, interesting period. Certainly, starting from scratch was literally starting a game, a war game from scratch was fascinating, because before that I always worked on existing rule sets. I've done several editions, like new edition of Warhammer, new edition of 40k, Lord of the Rings. So that all new edition, all things that were already existing. So I always modified things, but I never started from scratch. But I suppose the Lord of the Rings, we did start from scratch, but then again, that was Rick Priestley designing, and I was assisting. While with Kings of War, I was the lead writer, lead designer. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. So, I mean, when you were starting out with a simple, one of the things we have to note is if you haven't played first edition, we had one spell called Zap.
Zap. Yep. Yes, that was kind of putting all attack spells into one thing, zapping the enemy. Yes, whether that was fireballs or lightnings or whatever else. Yes.
I love the description of the spell in the book, with the lightning coming from there. So it was funny. So I loved first edition. I had a great time with it. I know that people worked up some strategies to kind of break it a bit. And so we needed to go over to second edition. And so now I think you had a little less involvement with second edition as we were going along, or how did that happen? That gets a little muddy for me in the history. So
I'm sorry, but actually, unlike you, that was an age ago and so many games ago that, I've written so many games in the last, I don't know, well, when was that? I mean, do you remember the time? Was it 2012, 13, 15?
Yeah.
So that's almost 20 years ago. That's terrifying.
Oh yeah, well, Mantic was celebrating their 10th anniversary, so
it's 20 years ago. I meant 10 years ago.
10 years ago, yeah.
Bad math. 10 years ago.
Still terrifying.
It is
Still
terrifying.
quite terrifying. Yeah, but it does feel like 20 in considering the amount of other systems and things I worked on in the meantime. So honestly, I will be honest, I don't remember the details of the changes between first and second, but you're right in the fact that because of the way Mantic is structured, and of course the Mantic, the biggest asset of Mantic is its community. Obviously, the community is very involved in the design process, and again, as a designer, that's something I wasn't used to have so much involvement from the public, and that meant that slowly but surely I kind of stepped more away from the rules. And second edition, I was still the lead writer, I was still making the decision, etc. But then I think it was by third edition, if I remember correctly, that I just went, no, actually, because at that point the rules committee was very heavily involved, and I thought, I think there's a community-led type of design, and I thought that basically didn't need me so much involved. I was still kind of playing games and offering feedback and stuff, but not in the chair, not in the captain's chair, so to speak.
In a way, I think the rules committee is a very interesting way to handle the game. Not that a game designer, like a professional game designer, cannot do good work with it, but I have the impression that you're always kind of on a schedule, right? Like you have to get things done because you're paid by the hour or paid on the mission. And in contrary, like the rule committee, they kind of keep a long-term involvement with the game because they do it on their free time. So what was where did the rule committee come from to begin with? Like, was that a Mantic idea, or did that come from playtesters from the initial edition? Or can you tell us a bit more how it transitioned from a game you wrote to a game that basically the rule committee took over in a way and maintained further and took further?
Yeah, I think it was an organic process. I don't think there was a plan, or I think it happened spontaneously, organically, as in the community that was playing the game and organizing events, etc. And it's often the case that there's a group of players that become experts, become very, very, they play lots of games. In fact, they end up, of course, like you were saying, playing more games than what a designer can play, because I mean you're pulling together so many people, the energies and time and brains of so many people. So I think because again Mantic relies on the community to be the core of its Kickstarters, and their whole business model is based on that. It seems natural that the community becomes the lead effectively, and it happens like that organically, the way I remember it at least.
There you go. And if people don't know, Alessio, you've written a lot of games. Bolt Action, very popular. So do those games have rules committees, or are you still involved in the day-to-day with those?
No, they are less reliant on basically there is no such thing as an official rules committee or anything like that. No, they are more designer-led, I suppose. I guess because, for example, Warlord Games doesn't do Kickstarter, doesn't do crowdfunding. So obviously it's a bit more, so if you want, maybe slightly more old-fashioned in the way it's run, which has advantages, disadvantages. I mean, God knows which one is the best way. I don't know which one is. I think different business models, different strategies, different development processes. So yes, no. In the case of Bolt Action and Warlord Games, I'm definitely still firmly in the director's chair. I'm still developing the game myself, and I'm in charge of the game. Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but because I played Bolt Action a bit a few years ago, the main rules are relatively stable because they work just great, and there's not much. I mean, there's an FAQ and there are some tiny changes here and there, but otherwise it's more like new theater books, like new campaigns or new specific books to cover a specific battle or specific period or era or location. And these obviously are written by, I guess, someone that is a bit more expert about this time and develops interesting game mechanics to recreate those battles. So I think it's also a different way to maintain the game. And
Absolutely.
It probably would be a bit harder to make it work with a community-based effort. So it makes sense in the case of Bolt Action, I think.
Yeah, and like you said, there's external experts in different sectors, different armies that write these supplements. However, all those supplements come through me. I edit them all and make sure that the rules are kind of fitting with the core rules. Obviously, some of them are more extreme than others. I mean, obviously, trying to fit an armored train into the main rules, they're not really designed to handle that kind of stuff. So sometimes it gets a bit more wild, but yes, it is more centered on design lead than community, rather than community lead. I mean, having said that, of course, it's not that the community is not listened to. There's still engagement and feedback and FAQs, like you said, and tournaments. So there is, and help with playtesting. But yeah, there is no official community, the rules committee or anything like that. No.
Oh, very cool. And if people don't know, besides building all these other games and things like that, Alessio is also responsible for kicking off Warpath. And I loved first edition Warpath. I'm sad that it left, actually. So
the very original Warpath, yes, it was interesting because I mean now obviously as people will know, I started to work on Epic Warpath, and it's been a long time since I went back into that universe, and it was surreal. Like, there's a funny story. I was reading the stats for the army list, starting to make your army list, etc. And we went to the GCPCS troops, and I was like, oh, what is acronym? What does it stand for? And I was like, Galaxy, and then Matt tells me, oh, it's the Galaxy Co-Prosperity Sphere. At which point I was like, oh, I made that up myself so many years ago. I had completely forgotten, but it was me actually creating that so long ago. And it's basically a pun, again, based on during World War II, the Japanese empire was trying to create this Asian co-prosperity sphere, they used to call it. So and that was why I call it that. But yeah, sometimes I come across names of vehicles, names of races, names of things like vermin, all that. It's like, oh, I made that up. So it's interesting to rediscover the things that you made up, because actually after so much time has passed, I've forgotten it all. Which is funny.
Yeah, if you work on tons of other projects, you can put all of those things kind of in the back of your brain.
This is Andy from Mantic Games, and you're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast. So much universe, so little time.
But so how did it come to be, like the first edition of Warpath? Did Mantic come to you and say, hey, we would like to do a sci-fi game? Or is it something you also had in mind, like having worked in 40K, I want to do something different, like similar but different than 40K? How did that come?
Yeah, there was the usual briefing session and attempt at creating a sci-fi game that was not as successful as Kings of War for various reasons. But the challenge was interesting, and I guess at the time I was also working on quite a lot of other systems which are similar in a way, like bolt action. It's interesting. Sometimes you can't really do everything you want, because if you're working with several customers at the same time, you cannot go, oh, I'll use the same mechanics that I use for this customer, for this other customer, because that feels, like it doesn't feel right. So obviously you don't want to be doing that. So yeah, the similar to Kings of War, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that now we are going back to that universe and really enjoying it. Oh, there you go. The old chestnut. Oh, sorry. Maybe I should
Mark
say what, because people cannot see what they're doing.
It's a podcast. It's audio only. So yes. Mark is showing off proudly his Warpath starter box, and it's cool art. Cool
there
box.
you go. Well, I've got a bunch of Warpath. I can pull it out and show that off too. But
a long time ago,
it was
a lot of fun. I love those rules. So, I mean, they're very similar to Kings of War, but with a spacey kind of thing, going on. So it was a lot of fun. But then they decided to, move forward. And I don't know. Whatever happened with that first edition of Warpath, it just was kind of cranking away. It was in the Mantic Journal. Everybody was hot and heavy. And then it just kind of like...
I think the person to answer that question is Ronnie, really, because I honestly don't know the answer. Why some decisions, probably commercial decisions, I guess, but I don't really know.
Yeah, that could be a reason. Maybe they had to focus a bit on something that found its community or found customers, and because Mantic was probably a very small company, it's still not big today, but back then it probably was even smaller and even more. Critical to focus on what actually works and keeps them alive. I don't know. That's a good question for next time Ronnie's on the show.
Absolutely. Write that down, Clem.
Yep. I'll be curious to listen to that one. Let's see what he says.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like some of the vehicles in that kit are being used today for the Forge Fathers, but the Orc vehicle is not. The Raptor, I believe, is not being used in the current game. So, and you'd be proud of me, Alessio. I've got some of those original Steel Warriors are in my current firefight force. So
a long time ago, indeed.
Absolutely. So, and then you got contacted for Epic or something like that, and then you got kind of. I don't want to get too deep into Epic because we have another podcast coming out about Epic.
Not short for the Epic, but yeah, it's interesting to see a bit the big picture also, and also what other project that River Horse, meaning you basically, has done, and maybe upcoming projects or what's on your mind these days.
Sure. Yeah. We'll we'll talk about Epic in much more detail when we get Matt and I together, and so we can be more specific. But yes, I've been summoned to work on that, and it was really, really cool. Yep, it's an interesting game.
So, is there a backstory with this too? Were you and Ronnie sitting in a bar, and it's like, I can design you a.
No, nothing.
Game is 4 pages.
Not at all. No, this was far more professional. And again, I should be very clear that the core design of the game is not mine. Matt did that, so I don't want to steal his thunder. So I've been brought in to refine to basically effectively the refining, the development of it, and I contributed to it, of course, because obviously that's my speciality, if you want, indeed, is rules. So I definitely influenced it and made changes with Matt. We work together very well, and I think part of the working well together is that I immediately went, okay, right, it's your game. I'm here to help you to make the game the best possible. So I always frame my feedback as suggestions. It's like, have you thought about doing this? This could be changed to this. So he's always trying to respect his design and trying to improve it, not to change it, not to, I would do it differently. Because personally, again, when I work with a team and you want feedback, I find it always very not useful when people say, oh, why do you do it this way? I will do it in a completely different way. And it's kind of like, yeah, but that's like starting from scratch. It's not useful. So what you want is, this is a design, improve it, not change it and restart from scratch, because that never ends. The process never ends.
There's a creative side to it, right? Like there's no right or wrong answer necessarily. Absolutely. Like as you said, like you bring the expertise to make his game better in a way, but it's still his game, and so part of the mission, I guess, is also to understand a bit this vision and push it forward.
Absolutely, respect his design, and obviously make he has the ultimate decision power, which is just right, because obviously it's I'm a external consultant, so obviously I can recommend, but I don't make the call.
Very, very cool. So now you've got River Horse, and you are headquartered in Nottingham, right?
That's right.
That's right. So what have you brought to the gaming world, Alessio, from River Horse, and what do you got planned for the future?
Wow, I mean, there's quite a list there. In terms
of, you've got time.
if we stick to services, the things that River Horse has worked on, we did Conquest. If you remember that game, we worked on that, helping with the design of Conquest. And then more recently, we worked on Dragon Bond for Draco Games. So I'm thinking of war games that I worked on. Also help with developing some other products from other companies, like again, more expansions for Black Powder, Hell Caesar. But so we work on other people's products, but also what we do is making our own product, and our own product started with a variant of chess called Shuro, which was effectively a chess hammer. It was effectively chess and wargaming mixed together, and that was our first product, own product. Then we started the licensing journey, and the first game that actually got to produce, which was licensed, and the license was the Terminator Genesis, the skirmish game, the miniatures game, which was very cool. Very interesting experience, and people still play it, which is a very cute little rule set. I think it's very evocative in how it creates the atmosphere of the war against the machines. I think I will reuse that rule set for a new thing we are doing. I will say in a minute or two. But anyway, so we did that, and that led us to the biggest thing we have ever done, which is we managed to strike a great relationship with the Jim Henson company. And so we made a Labyrinth board game, followed by a Dark Crystal. So basically we made a series of products based on Labyrinth, the movie from the 80s, if you remember, with David Bowie. And then we've done Dark Crystal, and more recently Fraggle Rock. So we've basically taken a lot of licenses from the Jim Henson company and turned them into games, all sorts of games. We've done board games, card games, role play games, and so puzzles. We've done all sorts of things with those properties, and they are, to this day, Labyrinth to this day is our bestseller by far. Particularly Labyrinth, the board game, but also the role play game is doing really well. So those products are the gems, the jewels in River Horse's collection. After that, another great one was we struck an incredible bargain with Hasbro, so one of the biggest companies in this sector, and we got the license for making a role play game based on My Little Pony, the new series, the TV series, which Friendship is Magic, which I think is a fantastic series. It is a really good animation, very wholesome, and I think it is good for the kids, but it's also good for the grown-ups that are watching. And it's that kind of multiple level of of watching and watching an episode. And so that was fun. Was great. Still going. We're still producing stuff for that, even though it's gone quieter now that the series has obviously finished a few years ago. So obviously it's not as big as when the series was on, but still there, still selling. And again, it's very family friendly. I mean, the point here is to allow people to play with their kids, and even a Jim Henson series is family. So it's family oriented. It's all good fun to spend time with your kids and your friends. So it's all very, very jolly and friendly. Other games we've made through the years, we've made a Hunger Games board game, which was great to work on. We made a Highlander game based. So it's almost like I cherry pick the licenses I really like, the stories I really like, and make games about them. We made a Pacific Rim war game with pre-painted model, which was I think it was a good game. The products were possibly a bit too ambitious for a company the size of River Horse. It was, it's
having
big.
Inventory is a bad idea. No, having to manage products.
It was a bit too big for. I think we stepped a little bit. The step was a bit too wide for our level. It almost broke us, but no, we managed to survive it. And I mean, the game is still around, and I think it's a good game and great models, but yeah, not easy to to keep in stock. And then I think I'm sure I'm forgetting something, trying to go by memory. But I think the My Little Pony and the Jim Henson collections, the Labyrinth of Crystal, are the big ones, are the two kind of jewels in the crown which are still going. And more recently, we have made an announcement about the new license we scored, which I am incredibly excited about, and that is the Ghost in the Shell. So we have a Ghost in the Shell license from Kodansha and Masamune Shirow himself, so the author of Ghost in the Shell. And for me, that is amazing. I mean, I read those graphic novels when I was younger, and 90s, and I love them. I love the graphic novels to bits. And then when the TV series came out and the films came out and all of the other stuff came out, it was always great. But for me, those graphic novels are the where it all started from. And being able to have a license on those and making products on that, for me, is super exciting. I am busy right now writing the first product, which is a role play game based on that, which is again astonishingly exciting to do. And then the plan would be to continue with card game, with particularly a skirmish war game, using maybe the Terminator. Well, obviously not literally the Terminator rules, but the core engine being the Terminator rules, and then adapting them to Ghost in the Shell. So yeah, ambitious plans. We'll see how many years will take to to bring them to fruition.
That's really interesting, and I think I also find it very interesting that. You take like well-known licenses and try to make tabletop games out of it, or like games that we like, obviously, and in a way bring in new audiences into this type of entertainment. And that's an interesting approach, because I'm obviously a big supporter of trying to bring in more people to enjoy tabletop games and painting miniatures and playing games with them. And I'm always, in a way, amazed that the universes that are used for all of these games, when you think about it, they're pretty similar, and they concern not that wide of a population. And for example, you would say the Games Workshop strategy of bringing even more people or going more mainstream is doing TV series with Amazon, right? And we will give them more exposure, but it's kind of like bringing their IP to more eyes. Whereas what you described also, like make tabletop games for other universes, I think is a very cool approach. It's a very interesting proposition. And I've also mentioned it on previous episodes, but my wife reads a lot of novels and romance novels, like sci-fi, fantasy and sci-fi stuff. And there are a huge amount of universes there, very rich, very interesting, a bunch of tropes there. And to the best of my knowledge, none of them have like tabletop game associated with it. So my next question is, at what point will you do a Buffy the Vampire Slayer board game or something? You know what I mean? Like this one, or like all of the other classics? Because when you think about it, some of these universes are pretty cool. And maybe also I'm not the target audience, but if you also only do universes that speak to half of the world population, that's kind of limiting your potential customer base, if you know what I mean.
True. And I mean, certainly River Horse has done a lot of stuff bringing in more feminine type of clientele. The Ghost in the Shell. Sorry, My Little Pony and Labyrinth have a very strong feminine fan base. So that was cool to see, moms and women in general to play games like that. Yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, didn't you go to a Labyrinth ball or something like that?
I certainly did. That was great.
So what was that all about? Was it just, obviously wasn't just for your game, but it was just a celebration of Labyrinth overall, or?
Oh yeah, not really anything to do with my game. It was something organized by the Jim Henson Company and the British event company here down south. They actually took the park where the first scene of Labyrinth is filmed, which is in High Wycombe. West Wycombe, I think, West Wycombe Park. And in there, they organized this event and invited Brian Froud, a lot of other artists, puppeteers, designers, the people that contributed to the movie, to Dark Crystal, to Labyrinth. And indeed, there was a masked ball in the evening where people went into costumes inspired to the masked ball that is in the Labyrinth movie. And we went as because it was a little market of people that had kind of merchandise that was related in some way, shape, or form to those worlds. And River Horse had a stand, and I went there, and it was amazing. I mean, the atmosphere, the place, it was very atmospheric. And I met Brian Froud. He autographed my book of Dark Crystal, the role play game. So it was very exciting. Absolutely.
Nice. So you also did a couple of board games, and I can't remember what was the one with. It was Waterloo. And Slaughter at Quelle Affair or something. See now.
Yep. Yeah, we did.
Clem is French, so he should be able to fix that. So my pronunciation was horrible. So
I think you pronounce it Quelle Affair.
Quelle Affair.
Quelle Affair.
Which means, Clem?
Could be what a mess or what a big deal, or depends on the context. I guess.
Yeah, the context is amazingly funny. The reason why is Waterloo Quelle Affair is because apparently after the Battle of Waterloo, Wellington and Blücher, so the generals of the German Prussian army and the Allied army that defeated Napoleon, met after the battle La Belle Alliance. This basically was the headquarters of Napoleon for quite a while during the battle, and the two of them met. And they wanted to speak to each other, but the Blücher didn't speak any English. Wellington didn't speak any German, so they looked at each other and decided that the only choice they had was to speak French because it was the only language they could speak together, which is hilarious if you think about it. It was like, we speak the language of the people that, yes, we were just fighting. It's the only language we can communicate in. So they basically, again, I think Wellington approaches Blücher and goes, quelle affaire. And Blücher goes, quelle affaire. So that's why the game is called Waterloo Quelle Affaire. You're right. I always forget, but as well as the licensed things, which are a bit more kind of famous, we've done through the years, we've done a few non-licensed things like Waterloo, because big fan and I wanted to design it. And recently we've done Noli, which is a game on a Italian little fishing village where I have a kind of a holiday home. It's on the coast, not far from Côte d'Azur, from Monaco, etc. It's on the Italian side, and but has rules in French, has rules in German, English, Spanish, Italian. So the funny, I mean, if you're in France, you can find it in Nolz. Nolz have them in stock. So by all means, get a copy of Noli.
Interesting. Then I have a question to you as well, kind of out of this. Do you still play games for fun? Like after work, do you play games, or is it just now part of you get to do it on your work time? And because I always think about when you do for work something you love, that used to be a hobby, then you kind of out of a hobby anymore.
You are very right. You're very right. People always say, "Oh, you're lucky. You work with games, with your, with your passion, your love, your gaming." But the drawback is that then your passion, your love, your hobby becomes your job. Therefore, it becomes a bit less.
Yeah, then you have to make it work, and sometimes you're like, nah, I don't want to do this. Please give me Excel, and I want to do something else. No, I'm joking. And the other question related to this is, do you play other people's games to, see what's going on around, or see where the market is going to, or do you not really have time to do this?
Well, I try to keep it short. I'll try to play games as much as possible. It is true that I don't play as many games as I used to, at least not war games. I do still play board games. I still play role-play games. I play a lot of computer games, frankly, because I guess that it's easier because obviously it's less organization. I think the only war game that I play, I still go to tournaments and I engage with a bit more, is Bolt Action, I think, because I guess like all players, like most players, when you get old, you seem to move from fantasy and science fiction to historical games. So I play, Bolt Action. I play also with the Perry twins a lot of Napoleonic games at their house. They have the most amazing tables, at Armies. So it's great to play with them. So I do play historical more these days rather than fantasy and science fiction.
Cool. And I think one last question for you is, there are some rumors about at some point Kings of War will go into a 4th edition. If you were to rewrite another fantasy game like Kings of War, is there anything you would do differently, or now that you have 15 more years of experience about designing games and creating this type of things, is there anything that you feel is still not well explored or that you would want to play with?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. I'll try
it's a big question. Ooh,
it's a big question. I mean, if anything, that would sound weird, I guess, but I would apply my usual mantra, that is, can it be simplified? Can it be simplified even further?
It's a good one. It's an interesting take on it, and I like it. I think I agree with your approach to it. Great. Mark?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to pipe in and agree on that. So I understand everything we did with 3rd, and, I love the game where it's at, but it is starting to pick up some complexity, and that argument is there. I came from the era of Zap. So so it's,
less is more. Less is more.
That's right. So
well, I mean, we can conclude with a quote from Jervis Johnson that he said. I mean, he quotes again from another designer. I forget who it is, but he says that a design is finished not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to remove.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I think Mantic needs a skirmish fantasy game, because Vanguard, I love it, the version, but clearly there must be a 2nd edition in the works, and so I hope they take your advice as well and come up with a great game.
Yeah, anyway. Well, I mean, after your collaboration with Matt on Epic, you can collaborate with Matt and get us a cleaner set of Vanguard, Alessio. That's a great idea, Clem.
Well, if they want me, I will say no, of course.
Well,
so
we vote that we want you, so.
We vouch for your ideas and your approach on it.
Well, thank you.
There you go. Well, as I mentioned earlier, Alessio is going to be back with us. We're going to be chatting more epics. So go ahead and keep your eyes out for that episode dropping soon. And, just a reminder that Kickstarter is going live on February 14th, right, Alessio?
That's right, on my birthday.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Well, Alessio, thanks so much for joining us today. You're welcome back anytime. And we're looking forward to chatting with you about some Epic here coming up very, very soon.
Very nice talking to you again. And Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
Talk to you next time.
There you go. So, Alessio, do you want to take us out? That's where it's so many universes, so little time, right?
Thank you for listening to the Mantic podcast, Mantic Universe podcast. And now we are done. So many universes, so little time.